Okay, so um, today let's dive into something that I think can really speed up your Python development workflow.
Okay.
Um, have you ever felt like you're just constantly wrestling with slow tools and just these tangled dependencies?
Yeah,
I know I have, and it can be like a real drain on productivity.
absolutely. It's a very, very common pain point for Python developers, and
Mhm.
that's where You've comes in.
Okay,
It's this command line tool that's designed to be like a fast and efficient alternative to a lot of the tools that we use every single day, like pip and virtual Neftly.
so it's like a Swiss Army knife for Python development, replacing a whole toolbox with just one streamlined solution.
That's a great analogy. I like that a lot.
Okay, cool.
And one of the key things that makes You've so fast is that it's written in Rust,
Okay.
which is a language that's known for its performance and its efficiency.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who might not be Rust experts, what is it about Rust that makes it so much faster than Python for tasks like this?
Well, one of the key differences is how Rust handles memory management. Unlike Python, which uses garbage collection,
Right.
Rust uses a system of ownership and borrowing, which allows the compiler to track memory usage very precisely
Okay.
and to avoid a lot of the runtime overheads that are associated with garbage collection.
So it's like having like a super efficient cleanup crew that's working in the background,
Yeah,
ensuring that everything is tidy and organized, but without slowing things down.
exactly. That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay.
And this efficient memory management is one of the reasons why OV can achieve such impressive speed improvements
Right.
over tools like pip, which are written in Python.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about swapping out one tool for another. It's about using a fundamentally different approach
Yes,
that leverages the strengths of Rust.
precisely.
Yeah.
And this performance difference is especially noticeable when you're working with large projects or these complex dependency trees.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be a real game changer. Now let's get into the specifics.
Mm.
One of the first things that caught my eye in the documentation was how OV handles building distributable packages.
Yes, that's a crucial part of any Python project workflow.
Yeah.
And OV makes it incredibly easy to create both source distributions
Okay.
and wheels, which are the two main formats for sharing Python packages.
Can you quickly remind us what the difference is between those two formats?
Sure.
I know wheels are becoming more popular, but I'm not always sure why.
Yeah, absolutely. So a source distribution is basically a compressed archive of your project's source code
Right?
and any necessary metadata.
Okay.
When you install a source distribution pip, or in this case, you
Right.
will first need to build the package from that source code.
So that involves compiling any ski extensions and running any setup scripts.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that can be a really time-consuming process, especially if your project has a lot of dependencies.
Yeah.
Wheels, on the other hand, are pre-built distributions that include the compiled code
Okay.
and are ready to be installed directly.
So they're like ready-to-eat meals versus having to cook from scratch.
I like that analogy.
Sure.
And because wheels are pre-built, they install much faster,
Right.
which can save you a ton of time, especially when you're working with large projects.
So with Juve, I can create both of these formats using a single command.
Exactly.
That seems a lot simpler than having to use separate tools.
Exactly. You just use the UV build command, and
Yeah.
you will take care of creating both the source distribution and the wheel for your project.
Okay.
It'll even put them in a nice little dist directory
Okay.
in your project.
So I can just run ubuild, and it will handle everything for me.
Exactly.
But what if I only want to create one format or the other?
That's no problem.
Okay.
UV gives you very fine-grained control over the build process.
Okay.
So if you want to create just the source distribution, you can use UV build stist. And if you just want the wheel, you can use UV build wheel.
That's great. I love having that level of control. Now, one thing that always concerns me when building packages is managing dependencies.
Mhm.
How does UVive handle that aspect?
It's a great question, and that's an area where IVE really shines.
Okay.
When you build a package of, automatically detects your project's dependencies
Okay.
and includes them in the package metadata.
So when someone installs my package, OV will automatically install those dependencies as well.
Exactly, and it does so using a lock file,
Okay.
which ensures that everyone who installs your package gets the exact same versions of those dependencies.
I've heard about lock files before, but I've never really understood how they work.
Okay.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. A lock file is basically a snapshot of your project's dependency tree
Right.
at a specific point in time.
Okay.
It lists all of your project's dependencies and their exact versions.
So it's like a blueprint that specifies exactly which ingredients are needed to build your project.
That's a good way to put it. And when someone installs your package, you will use the lock file to ensure that they get the exact same versions of those dependencies,
Right.
even if those dependencies have been updated since you created the package.
That's a huge advantage, especially for projects with a lot of dependencies.
Absolutely.
It helps avoid those frustrating, works on my machine scenarios
Exactly.
where someone else can't run your code because they have different versions of the dependency.
Exactly. Lock files are essential for ensuring reproducible builds
Right.
and avoiding dependency conflicts.
Okay.
And UHub makes it incredibly easy to create and manage lock files.
So it's not just about building packages faster, it's also about building them more reliably
Yes,
and ensuring that they can be installed and run consistently by anyone.
precisely. And that's one of the key benefits of using a tool like Yuva that's designed with performance and reliability in mind.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground on package billing. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about another challenge that Python developers often face: managing multiple Python versions.
Yeah,
I think we've all been there.
the classic
The
problem.
bane of our existence.
Right. You're working on one project that requires Python 3.7, another that's stuck on 3.9. And maybe you're even experimenting with the latest 3.12 release.
Yeah.
Keeping all of those straight can be a real headache.
Tell me about it. I've spent countless hours messing around with virtual environments and path variables
Oh, yeah.
just to get the right Python version running.
Yeah,
It's a huge time sink.
absolutely. And that's another area where UVA really shines.
Okay.
It has built-in support for managing multiple Python versions,
Okay.
making it super easy to install, switch between, and even pin specific versions to your projects.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Walk me through how it works.
Yeah.
Let's say I need to install Python 3.0 for a new project. What's the UVic command for that?
It's remarkably simple. You just use UV Python install 3.0.
Okay.
You will download the specified Python version
Right.
and install it in a managed location.
So no more hunting down installers or messing around with system paths.
Exactly. OVA handles all of that for you,
Okay.
keeping everything organized and easily accessible.
And what if I need multiple versions installed? Do I just run that command multiple times
Yep,
with different version numbers?
that's exactly right.
Okay.
You can install as many Python versions as you need.
Okay, that's already a huge improvement over my current workflow.
Good.
But how do I actually switch between these different versions?
That's where the Python flag comes in.
Okay.
You can use it with a bunch of different of commands
Okay.
to specify which Python version you want to use.
Okay.
For example, if I wanted to run a script using Python 3.near, I would just use of run Python 3.nino myscript.py.
So that same Python flag works for running scripts, installing packages, building projects, basically any task where the Python version matters.
Precisely. It provides this consistent and intuitive way to control which Python version is being used.
That's a really elegant solution.
Oh,
It feels much more streamlined than having to activate and deactivate different virtual environments all the time.
and speaking of virtual environments, UVI has a really interesting approach to those as well.
Okay.
While it encourages managing Python versions directly with UVI,
Okay.
you can still use virtual environments if your project requires them.
So it's not an all or nothing approach. I can integrate into my existing workflow gradually.
Exactly. You can create a virtual environment using UVI Venv,
Okay.
similar to the standard Venv module,
Right.
but then manage the packages and Python version within that environment using UVI.
So it's like having the best of both worlds. The isolation and control of virtual environments combined with the speed and efficiency of Vue.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And Uve even provides a familiar UVI pip interface.
Hold on, UVi.
Yes,
Does that mean I can still use pip commands within U?
absolutely. We know that a lot of developers are comfortable with pip.
Right.
So UV provides a compatible interface. You can use commands like uvapip, install uvepip freeze, and others, just like you would with regular pip.
So what's the advantage of using uvpip instead of just sticking with regular pip?
Well, for one, it's significantly faster.
Okay.
Remember all those performance advantages we talked about with Rust?
Right.
They apply here as well.
Right.
Plus, UvePip offers some additional features that you won't find in standard pip,
Such as?
like dependency overrides and platform-independent resolutions.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Can you give me an example of how those extra features might be useful in real-world scenarios?
Sure. Let's say you're working on a project that depends on a library called requests.
Okay.
But one of your project's dependencies requires a slightly older version of requests that's incompatible with your project's needs.
Right.
This can create like a really nasty dependency conflict.
I've been there, and it's a nightmare to resolve.
It is a nightmare.
You end up either trying to find compatible versions or manually hacking things together,
Right.
neither of which is ideal.
Exactly. With evepip, you can use a dependency override
Right.
to specify exactly which version of request should be used in this specific situation.
All right.
This gives you really fine-grained control over your dependencies
Right.
and allows you to resolve conflicts without having to modify your project's code or wrestle with complex workarounds.
So it's like having a precision tool for surgery on your dependency tree.
Yes.
You can target specific dependencies and make adjustments without affecting the overall structure.
I like that analogy a lot.
Okay.
It's a real lifesaver when you're dealing with complex projects with many interconnected dependencies.
This is all starting to sound incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to admit, I'm a bit curious about how OV actually pulls all of this off under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
What's the magic behind the scenes?
Well, a lot of the magic comes down to how OV leverages Rust's capabilities.
Okay.
One key concept is the use of a global cache for
Okay.
package download.
So instead of downloading the same package multiple times for different projects or environments,
Yeah.
it stores a single copy in a central location.
Exactly.
Right.
This saves disk space
Right.
and significantly speeds up installations
Okay.
because Diouf can just copy the package from the cache
Right.
instead of downloading it again every time.
It's like having a well-stocked pantry
Yeah,
where you can grab what you need without having to go shopping every time.
exactly. And it goes beyond just storing the packages themselves.
Okay.
You've also caches the results of dependency resolution,
Okay.
which is that process of figuring out which versions of all your dependencies are compatible with each other.
Right.
This is often a computationally expensive process,
Yep.
especially for large projects.
So it's not just about avoiding redundant download. It's about avoiding the computational overhead of repeatedly solving the same dependency puzzle.
Precisely. By caching these results,
Right.
you can significantly speed up the process of installing and managing dependencies.
That's a really clever optimization.
Yeah.
It's like solving a complex Sudoku puzzle and then saving the solution so you don't have to start from scratch every time.
And this caching mechanism is just one example of how Evolve is designed for speed and efficiency at every level.
Okay.
It also leverages Rust's very powerful concurrency features
Great.
to parallelize a lot of tasks, further improving performance.
It's like having a team of highly skilled workers
Yeah,
all collaborating to get things done as quickly as possible.
exactly.
All right. And all of this optimization translates into a smoother, more responsive, and ultimately more enjoyable development experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm getting a sense of how much thought and engineering have gone into building up.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, with all this focus on speed, are there any trade-offs? Does this performance come at a cost?
That's a great question. And it's always important to consider the potential downsides of any new tool.
Right.
One thing to keep in mind is that Evolve is still relatively young
Yep.
compared to more established tools like pip and virtual and Vive.
So it might not have the same level of maturity or community support
Yeah, that's a fair point.
as those more established tools.
Yeah. However, UZ is rapidly gaining popularity,
Okay.
and its community is growing quickly.
That's good.
Plus, the developers are super active
Okay.
and responsive to feedback.
And the documentation seems quite comprehensive and well-written, which is always a good sign.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So while it might not have the same long history as some other tools,
Right.
it's a project with a lot of momentum
Okay.
and a very bright future.
Another concern that comes to mind is compatibility.
Yeah.
Does the U play nicely with existing Python projects that
Mhm.
might be using different tools or workflows?
That's a valid concern. But UViz is designed to be as compatible as possible
Okay.
with existing projects and workflows.
So it's not like I have to completely rewrite my project or abandon my existing tools to start using OV.
Not at all. You can gradually adopt OV into your workflow,
Okay.
starting with the features that you find most beneficial.
Right.
For example, you could start by using OV just for managing dependencies
Okay.
while still using pip for other tasks.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
It allows developers to kind of dip their toes in the water
Yeah.
and see how OV fits into their workflow without having to make a complete switch all at once.
Exactly. And the OV documentation provides really clear guidance on how to integrate OV with existing projects and tools.
So there's plenty of support available for those who want to make the transition.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to address any concerns is to simply dive in and start using OV.
Okay.
The learning curve is surprisingly gentle,
Good.
and the potential benefits are quite significant.
I think you've convinced me to give it a try.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for ways to make my Python development workflow more efficient and enjoyable.
Yeah.
And it seems like OV could be the key to unlocking a whole new level of speed and productivity.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. It's not just a tool, it's like a paradigm shift
Okay.
in how we approach Python development.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, from managing multiple Python versions to supercharging our dependency management with OV.
Yes.
But before we wrap up, are there any hidden gems or lesser-known features of Vue that our listeners should know about?
Mm-hmm.
Features that might not be obvious at first glance,
Yeah.
but could really level up their Python development game.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm excited to hear about this.
One feature that often gets overlooked is Vue's support for alternative Python implementations,
Okay.
like PyPy.
PyPy. I've heard about it, but I haven't had a chance to really dive in.
Okay.
Can you give us a quick rundown of what PyPy is
Yeah,
and why it might be something a Python developer would want to explore?
absolutely. So PyPy is an alternative implementation of the Python language.
Huh.
It's basically a different way of running your Python code.
Right.
One of the key benefits of PyPy is its speed.
Okay.
For certain types of Python code, PyPy can be significantly faster
Wow.
than the standard CPython implementation.
So it's like having a turbocharged engine for your Python code.
Exactly. PyPy uses a technique called just-in-time or JIT compilation, which allows it to dynamically optimize your code as it runs.
Okay.
This can lead to dramatic performance improvements,
Wow.
especially for code that involves a lot of loops or numerical computations.
It's impressive. So how does UV make it easy to work with PyPy? Is it a complicated process to switch between CPython and PyPy?
Not at all. Remember the UVPython install command we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
Well, you can use that same command to install PyPy. For
Okay.
example, to install PyPy for Python version 3.9, you would simply run UVPython install pypy at 3.9.
So it's just a matter of specifying the PyPy prefix
Yep.
when installing the Python version. That's remarkably straightforward.
And once you have PyPy installed,
Okay.
you can switch between it and CPython
Right.
using that same Python flag we've been using all along.
Right.
For example, to run a script using PyPy, you would use uv run python pypy at 3.9 myscript.py.
So it's a consistent and unified approach to managing different Python implementations.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really nice touch. All right. Now let's talk about another aspect of Python development that can sometimes be tricky,
Okay.
working with command line tools.
Right.
I know I often end up cluttering my global environment with all sorts of tools,
Yeah.
which can lead to conflicts and confusion.
Absolutely. Managing command line tools can be a pain,
Yes.
but Juve offers a really elegant solution for this
Okay.
with its UVX command.
Oh, UVS. I don't think we've discussed that one yet. Tell me more.
So Juve is basically an alias for Juve tool run,
Okay.
and it allows you to run any Python tool directly from the command line,
Okay, good.
even if it's not installed globally.
Wait, so I can just run any Python tool without having to install it first?
Yes.
How does that work?
Juve leverages its global cache and virtual environment capabilities to make this possible.
Okay.
So when you run a tool using UVX,
Right.
it first checks its cache to see if that tool is already available.
Okay.
If not, it automatically downloads and installs the tool into an isolated virtual environment.
So it's like having a virtual toolbox where I can access any tool I need whenever I need it
Right, cool.
without having to worry about cluttering my system or creating conflicts.
Precisely. And because the tools are run in isolated environments,
Right.
you don't have to worry about them interfering with each other
Oh.
or with your project's dependencies.
That's fantastic. It
Yeah.
solves a real pain point for me. And if there's a tool I use frequently, can I install it globally
Yes.
so I don't have to go through the download and installation process every time?
Absolutely. You can use IV tool install.
Okay.
This will add the tool to your system's path,
Okay.
making it accessible from anywhere.
So it's a perfect balance of flexibility and convenience.
Yeah.
I can use tools on demand
Yeah.
or install them globally if needed.
Exactly. And because it's all part of the UV ecosystem,
Right.
you get all those benefits of speed, efficiency, and reliability that we've been talking about.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into EVA. It's clear that it's a powerful and versatile tool that can really streamline Python development.
Absolutely.
As we wrap things up, what are your final thoughts for our listeners who might be considering giving it a try?
I would say don't just take our word for it. Dive in and experience the speed and efficiency of UV for yourself.
Okay.
You can find the documentation on the UV website,
Right.
and there's a really vibrant and helpful community on their Discord server.
That's great advice.
Mm.
The documentation is truly a valuable resource for anyone getting started with you. It's
Hmm.
clear, concise, and packed with examples,
It is.
and the community is always there to answer questions and provide support.
Absolutely. And I think you'll find that UV is more than just a tool. It's a game changer that can fundamentally improve your Python development experience.
Well said. So to our listeners, I encourage you to explore Aviv and discover its potential.
Please do.
It might just become your new favorite Python development companion.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our first segment on UV, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more in-depth insights and practical tips in just a moment.
So where were we?
We were talking about if
Right, we were talking about if.
and how it can help us manage multiple Python versions.
Exactly. Multiple Python versions. It's a classic problem. You know, one project needs 3.7, one's on the 3.9, and maybe you're even trying out that new 3.12.
Yeah, trying to keep those all straight is a huge headache.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like I spend more time messing with environments and path variables than I do actually coding.
Right, exactly. It's such a time sink.
And you know what? This is another area where Eve just shines.
Okay,
It has this built-in support for managing all those different Python versions.
okay.
It makes it so easy to install them, switch between them, even pin specific versions to your projects. You wouldn't believe it.
So walk me through this. How does this work?
Okay, sure.
Let's say I need Python 3.1 in for a new project.
Okay.
What's the magic of the command?
It's so simple. You just use EvePython, install 3.1 in. That's it.
Okay.
You will go download that version for you. Install it in a nice managed location.
So I can finally say goodbye to hunting down those installers and messing with system paths.
Exactly. AV handles all the dirty work, keeps everything organized, and, you can get to it easy.
Okay. And what happens if I need like multiple versions installed?
You just run that same command
Okay.
multiple times with different version numbers.
Okay.
That's all you got to do.
So UV won't freak out if I have a bunch of Python versions hanging around.
Oh, no, Eufy can handle it all.
Okay, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone is a big improvement over my current workflow.
Right.
But how do I actually switch between all these different versions?
That's where the Python flag comes in.
Okay, the Python flag.
Yeah, you can use this with a bunch of different of commands
Okay,
to tell it exactly which Python version you want to use.
got it.
Like, let's say you want to run a script using Python 3.fen.
Go.
You just type of run, and then Python 3.meno, and then the name of your script, myscript.py.
So is that right? That same Python flag, I can use it for everything? Running scripts, installing packages, building projects, anything where I need to specify a version.
It gives you that consistency.
Okay,
It's intuitive. You always know how to control which Python version is running things.
that's pretty elegant.
Thanks.
It definitely seems a lot more streamlined than having to activate and deactivate all those virtual environments.
And speaking of virtual environments,
Yeah.
UVEF has a really cool approach to those too.
Okay, I'm listening.
So while it really encourages you to manage your Python versions directly with UVEF,
Okay.
you can still use virtual environments if you absolutely need to for your project.
Okay, so it's not an all or nothing thing I can ease of into my existing workflow.
Exactly. You can dip your toes in the water first.
Okay, I like that.
So you can use the UV venv command. It's
Okay.
very similar to the regular venv module.
Right.
But then you manage all the packages and the Python version within that environment using UVEF.
So it's the best of both worlds.
Right.
I get the isolation and control of virtual environments, but with the speed and efficiency of you.
Right. You get the best of both worlds. And OOV even provides you with a familiar interface.
Okay, what do you mean?
It has this OOV pip interface.
Wait, hold on, UV pip.
Yes.
So does that mean I can still use like regular pip commands?
Exactly. We know a lot of developers are very comfortable with pip.
Yeah, makes sense.
So we wanted to give them a compatible interface.
Okay.
You can use commands like of pip install, of pip freeze, all those familiar ones.
So what's the benefit of using of pip instead of just sticking with regular pip then?
Well, for one, it's way faster.
Okay.
Remember all those performance advantages we talked about with Rust?
Right.
They apply here too.
Okay.
And then of pip actually has some extra features that you won't find in regular pip.
Okay, such as?
Things like dependency overrides and platform independent resolutions.
All right, I am curious about those.
Okay, so let me give you an example. Imagine you're working on a project and it depends on this library. Let's say it's called requests.
Okay, I've used that one.
Right. But one of your project's other dependencies needs an older version of requests
Oh, no.
that isn't compatible with what you need.
Right.
This can cause like this really annoying dependency conflict.
It is a nightmare to resolve.
Oh, it's the worst, right? You end up trying to find compatible versions or you're like manually hacking things together.
And neither of those is a good solution.
No, they're not. But with OVPIP, you can use this thing called a dependency override.
Okay, a dependency override.
Yeah, it lets you specify exactly which version of requests to use in this specific situation.
Okay, that sounds useful.
Yeah, it gives you that fine-grained control over all your dependencies.
Right.
It lets you resolve conflicts without having to change your code or, come up with all these crazy workarounds.
So it's like having a scalpel for your dependency tree.
I love that analogy.
I can target exactly what I need to fix without messing up the whole structure.
That is exactly what it is.
Okay, I like it.
It can really be a lifesaver when you're working with these big, complex projects that have all these interconnected dependencies.
You're making of sound really powerful.
It is powerful.
I have to ask, though, how does it actually work under the hood?
Okay, so a lot of the magic comes down to how of uses Rust.
Okay.
One of the key concepts is that it uses a global cache.
Okay, like a pantry.
Yeah, exactly, like a pantry for package downloads.
Okay, so instead of downloading the same package a zillion times for all my different projects,
Right,
it just keeps one copy in this central location.
exactly. And that saves a lot of disk space.
Makes sense.
But it also really speeds up installations
Okay, how so?
because of can just copy the package from the cache
Wow.
instead of having to go download it again every single time.
Like grabbing a snack from the pantry.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of going to the grocery store every time you're hungry.
Right, and it doesn't stop there.
Okay, go on.
You've also caches the results of dependency resolution.
Okay, now remind me, what is dependency resolution again?
That's the process of figuring out which versions of all your dependencies will actually work together.
Right.
And that can
Okay.
be a pretty computationally expensive process,
Yeah, especially when you have a large project.
especially with large projects.
Yeah.
So by caching all those results,
Okay.
you can speed up installing and managing dependencies.
So it's not just about skipping the downloads.
No.
It's about skipping the whole brain work of solving the same puzzle over and over again.
It's like solving a Sudoku puzzle
Right.
and then saving the solution so you don't have to start from scratch every time.
I like that. And is this caching mechanism, is that the main thing that makes it so fast?
It's one of the things.
Okay.
But U is designed for speed at every level.
Okay.
It uses Rust concurrency features, so it can do a lot of things in parallel.
Okay, so it's like having a whole team of efficient workers,
Yeah,
all doing their part to get the job done quickly.
that's a great way to put it. And all of this optimization means that your development experience is just smoother. It's more responsive. It's just more enjoyable.
Okay. I'm starting to see why people are so excited about OOV.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, with all this talk about speed, are there any downsides?
It's a good question. You always have to think about the trade-offs, right?
Right. Are we sacrificing something to get this amazing performance?
One thing to remember is that OOV is still pretty new
Okay.
compared to those more established tools like pip and virtual and Bove.
So it might not be as mature or have as much community support yet?
That's a fair point.
Okay.
However, OOV is gaining popularity very quickly,
This is good.
and the community is growing fast.
Okay.
Plus, the developers are really active and they listen to feedback.
And the documentation I've been looking at, it seems pretty good,
It is good.
which is always a good sign.
Yeah, so even though it doesn't have the long history of some other tools,
Right.
it's a project that's got a lot of energy behind it,
Okay.
and I think it has a very bright future.
Now, what about compatibility?
Okay.
If I have a project that's using other tools or a different workflow,
Right.
will UF play nicely with that?
That's a valid concern, but OOV was designed to be as compatible as possible
Okay.
with your existing projects and workflows.
So I don't have to rewrite my whole project or abandon the tools I'm used to.
No, not at all. You can adopt OOV gradually.
Okay.
Start with the features you like best.
Right.
You could start using OOV just for dependency management
Okay.
and keep using pip for other tasks.
Okay, so it's like a gentle introduction to OOV.
Exactly, a nice on-ramp.
And you mentioned that the documentation has guidance on how to integrate OOV with existing projects.
It does. It's very clear guidance.
Okay, good. So there's support for people who want to make the switch.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think the best way to see if you like it
Right.
is to just try it out, start using OOV.
Okay.
It's really easy to learn,
Good.
and the benefits are substantial.
You know what? You've convinced me. I'm always looking for ways to improve my workflow, to
Oh.
make it more efficient, more enjoyable. And it seems like OOV could really help me achieve that.
I think you'll be really happy with it. It's not just a tool. It really is a different way of thinking about Python development.
So it's a paradigm shift.
A paradigm shift.
So we've talked a lot about Ovid, how it can help us manage Python versions and dependencies and all that good stuff.
We have. It's been quite a deep dive.
It has, but before we wrap up, are there any, like, hidden gems,
Oh, yeah.
features that maybe people wouldn't know about right away, but that could really help them?
Absolutely. One feature that often gets overlooked is UV's support for alternative Python implementations,
Okay. Like what?
like PyP.
PyPy? Okay. I've heard of PyP,
Yeah.
but I'll be honest, I haven't really had a chance to dig into it.
Okay.
Can you give us a quick overview of what PyPy is
Yeah.
and why a Python developer might want to use it?
So PyPy is an alternative implementation of Python.
Okay.
Basically a different way to run your Python code.
Okay, so it's not CPython.
Right. It's not CPython.
It's a different way of running the same code.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And one of the big advantages of PyPy is speed. For certain types of code, PyPy can be significantly faster than CPython.
Really? So it's like a performance boost for my Python code.
Yeah, it's like a turbocharged engine for Python.
I like that.
PyPy uses this technique called JIT compilation.
JIT compilation.
Yeah, just-in-time compilation.
Okay.
And that allows it to optimize your code as it's running.
Okay, so it's doing optimizations on the fly.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this can lead to some pretty impressive speed improvements.
Wow.
Especially for code that has a lot of loops or number crunching.
That's interesting. So how does U fit into all of this?
Well, remember that EV Python install command we talked about?
Yes.
You can use that to install PyPy as well.
Okay.
So let's say you want PyPy for Python 3.9.
Okay.
You'd run uv python install PyPy at 3.9.
So you just add that PyPy prefix,
Exactly.
and U knows to install PyPy.
Yep, that's all it takes.
That's really straightforward.
And once you have it installed, switching between CPython and PyPy is easy.
Okay, how do I do that?
You use that same Python flag.
Oh, so it's consistent.
Yep, it's all integrated.
I like that it's all part of the same system.
Yeah, so if you wanted to run a script with PyPy, you would do uv run python pypy at 3.9 myscript.py.
Okay, so it's all unified. I don't have to learn a bunch of different commands.
Exactly.
Appreciate that.
Now, another thing that can be a bit of a pain in Python development is managing command line tools.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
Right. You end up with all these tools installed globally.
And it gets messy?
It gets really messy. It can lead to conflicts.
Yes, exactly.
But UV has a really nice solution for this.
Okay, what is it?
It's the UVX command.
UVS.
Yeah, it's actually an alias for UV tool run.
Okay.
And it lets you run any Python tool directly from the command line,
Okay.
even if it's not installed globally.
Wait, hold on. You're saying I can run a tool without installing it?
Yeah, it sounds kind of magical.
It does. How does that work?
So UV uses that global cache we talked about.
Right, the pantry.
Exactly. And it also uses virtual environments behind the scenes. So when you run a tool using UVX, it first checks the cache
Okay.
to see if the tool's already there.
Makes sense.
If it's not, it automatically downloads and installs it.
Okay.
But it does this in an isolated virtual environment.
Oh, so it's not messing up my global setup.
Exactly. It's all contained.
That's really smart.
Yeah, so it's like having a virtual toolbox.
I like that analogy.
Right. You can access any tool you need without cluttering up your system.
And without those pesky conflicts.
Exactly.
Now, what if I have a tool that I use all the time?
Okay.
Do I have to go through that download process every time?
You can install it globally if you want.
Okay, how do I do that?
You can use the command of tool install
Okay.
that will add the tool to your path.
So it's available everywhere.
Yep. From anywhere on your system.
I have the flexibility to use tools on demand.
Right.
Or install them globally if I need to.
Exactly. It's the best of both worlds.
And of course, it's all powered by UV.
Yeah.
So we get all those speed and efficiency benefits. Absolutely.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have covered a lot.
We've really gotten a good look at what UFSUV can do.
Yeah, I hope our listeners are as excited about it as I am.
I think they will be. It's a really impressive tool.
It is.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are thinking about giving UV a try?
My advice would be just dive in and try it.
Okay.
You can find all the documentation on their website,
Okay.
and they have a really active and friendly community on their Discord server.
I've heard good things about their documentation.
It's excellent. Very clear and easy to follow.
And the community is always a good resource.
Always there to help.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, I encourage you to explore UVM.
Yeah, check it out.
See what it can do for you.
You might be surprised.
It might just become your new go-to tool for Python development.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into UV.
It's been fun.
It has been. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.